Hello and welcome to this special World Cup webinar today. So I'm John and I'm the co-founder of InspireCoachEd.com and I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes. So we've got 4 panelists ready to discuss the 24 World Cup trends and what we can expect from this 2018 edition. So I'm going to ask quickly the panelists to quickly introduce themselves. So Sarah, would you like to tell us about yourself?
I'm Sarah Hilton, lecturer of football and coaching science at Wrexham Glyndŵr University in North Wales, coach educator for the FAW Trust as well.
Yeah, Stevie.
I'm a coach at Burlington Youth Soccer Club in Canada. I started doing a tactical teacher online course, which has been going for 3.5 months, and I have a UEFA A license.
Okay, Gary.
Gary Cernine, currently working in Chicago with the NWSL women's team here, Chicago Red Stars, and also then started Modern Soccer Coach.
And Gerard.
A licensed coach, currently in transition. I'm about to announce my new role shortly as a director of coaching in New York. Been working for over 13 years, published author.
So let's get going. So yeah, before we went online, we were briefly discussing about the news from Spain today. So before we come to the actual webinar, maybe we can chat about that. So maybe we'll put it out there. What could be the repercussions then of this? So Fernando Hierro has now taken over the Spanish squad after the manager was sacked 2 days before the first game. What do you think about that, Gerard? What are the repercussions for the Spanish squad? Have they got enough quality to just win it anyway?
I think it's going to be tough. I didn't actually know until you told me today. I've not had a chance to with the news. So as you mentioned it to me, I was having a look. I think it's going to be a tough environment. But I think as well, having said that, these are experienced pros. You go into a tournament, you've got to think about one thing, and that's getting a result, having an impact. So I don't think too many lads would be too distracted by it. I think immediately their focus should be on, focusing on the immediate performance and doing what they can control. Obviously, it's not great. It's not great timing, but I don't think it'll affect them too much.
Yeah. What do you think, Sarah? Yeah.
I just think now preparation, it's 2 days away, their game against Portugal now, and I think it is a huge curveball. I think if I was a player, and for a manager who's been there for a long time as well, he's been that consistent factor, I suppose, for so long, and some of those players have been there for a long time. So it's probably going to feel slightly alien to them, I suppose, to go into a fixture without that person that they're used to. But I think, like Gerard said, really, I think there'll be a team of people around them supporting them. The principles that they'll be working on in training and their tactical and their tactical framework, if you like, shouldn't really change going into the game. They'd have been preparing for this game now prior to today. So I don't think those things will change. I just think psychologically now, in terms of their preparation, I think focus is going to be key now in terms of keeping that focus and making sure that the preparation is right prior to the game in 2 days' time.
Gary, Stevie, any thoughts on it?
I don't think the team will probably run on autopilot. I agree with everyone's points. They're so experienced and they've played at this level and delivered at this level that I don't think it'll have too many repercussions in terms of their state of play. But I do think that you bring in an experienced coach, and we're going to talk a World Cup terrain, set pieces, where the coach is a big part of delivering that there and getting that piece right. And then also substitutions. Fernando Hierro is going to have a lot of respect in the squad, and the players are probably going to warm to him, but he's got to make some big calls here. 15 minutes to go, 10 minutes to go, and it'll test his mettle. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Interesting. Anything, Stevie?
No, I just think that they're experienced players. They play around the world. They're among the best players in the world. They know how to play. I think the difference between Hierro and Lopetegui might be just some preferences or changes that he makes, or how he feels about certain players. But otherwise, Spain are one of the best teams in the tournament, and the players will decide whether they win it or not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it'll be interesting to see on Friday. So who would like to go first?
I'll be quite keen to kick off. I think one of the biggest things, me and Gary were talking about this before, the biggest thing that's going to be interesting going into this tournament compared to previous is the ability to maximise set pieces. If you look at a lot of the tournaments now, there's more goals scored from set plays. You look at England's game against Nigeria the other day, and obviously the goal scored from corners. I think that's going to be absolutely critical. And then obviously, as Gary alluded to, the role of the substitute. If you compare it to the last report in terms of subs coming on and making an impact, they had a better, more substantial impact in the game in Brazil compared to South Africa. You know, there was more goals scored in the last World Cup. I think it was 32 goals off the top of my head. So I think that's going to be absolutely critical going into this World Cup. And you look at it in the Champions League, you know, Bale coming on. I think, going on to your point about Spain, these are some of the best players in the world. And if we're talking about self-learners and we're talking about players that are going to take ownership, they're absolutely critical in their organisation, their preparation. So I think how substitutes come on and make an impact, that's going to be key. And then obviously, as Stevie's got a lot of knowledge on in terms of how teams build up and how they use possession, I think it'll be interesting. What do you think, Stevie, about a lot of teams with the back three? You know, in previous World Cups, we've seen back fours. I know people get too fixated on systems of play, but it'll be quite interesting to see how teams use within an animation of play, you know, how they build up with a back three or whatever it looks like.
I think most teams are going to try and build up from the back. I don't think there's that many teams in the tournament who are just going to play like Ireland and just get it, shell it to a striker and chase it forward. Sorry, anybody from Ireland, but they're brutal. When we look at even like teams like Egypt and stuff, they're still going to build up from the back. Tunisia, every one of these teams are going to try and provoke pressure and play through. I think what will be the biggest difference between the teams is going to be how organised they are in transition phases. I think if we look in the last 2 years, Liverpool and Leipzig, Salzburg, you know, big teams who are playing in transition cycles, they play organised when they have the ball, but they really take advantage of when the other team lose it or the speed that they can counter-attack or counter-press. And so I think for me, aside from the build-up play, which everybody's going to try and do to an extent, the transition cycle is going to be the most important factor, I think, in this one.
I've got a quick stat for you based on that, Stevie, 2014. So 34 of the 171 goals scored at the 2014 World Cup came from quick transition play or counter-attack. So do you reckon that that's going to increase now in this next World Cup?
Yeah, I think that there'll be certain teams who set up to play kind of on a Messi style. They don't want the game to be organised. If you play against Spain and the game is always organised, they're better than you in organised phases. So you need to make the game messy and chaotic. And as we saw with like Liverpool against Man City, when the game is messy and chaotic, that team with the players who are really impulsive, that attack spaces better, they'll be the ones that they make the biggest surprises. I think in the last World Cup we had Algeria took Germany really far in the knockout round or in the group stage where they had a 6-3-1 and they were really organised and hard to beat. I think the game's evolved so much even in the last couple of years where now teams will find a way to break down a 6-3-1. So the transition phase, the transition cycle, I think based on the last World Cup, is going to have even more significant, like just what Gerard was saying about set pieces. Areas where you can really be effective and get yourself a couple of cheap goals here and there might be the difference between finishing bottom and getting to the second round.
Do you not think as well, though, with the defensive structures now, that teams are becoming a lot more clever in how they really restrict space? You know, a lot of goals now are coming later on in the game, aren't they, in the latter stages of the game? Do you not think it's going to be even more increasingly difficult, irrespective of what their strategy is in transition or through normal build-up to score goals? I mean,
I think one thing that I'm interested in, I think if you look at, like you say, Jared, with certain animations, I think teams are becoming so defensively organised because they're ready for that transition that I think if you look at the statistics now, I think in terms of penetrating central areas or breaking the defensive line, now a lot of the times goals are happening but starting from wide areas because there's been this emphasis on zone 14 and all these, you know, from coach education. A lot of teams now, when they're, you know, defending, will play with a twin screen, which then on transition will become just an individual one screening. But I think that emphasis on a twin screen now is forcing the play out wide more. And if you look at the statistics now, that, you know, if you look at the number of crosses, even from the Euros 2016, I think in 2000, I think the last one there was like over 2,000 crosses. I think it was like over 40 per game, which is almost double from what it was the previous campaign. And again, I think that's because teams are defensively becoming so well organised to protect that central zone and kind of conceding out wide. So I'm quite interested to see how they deal with that defending out wide, or if they just start with the one, or if they do start with a twin screen and then become the one, and then how they react to that.
Yeah, I have a stat as well from that, Sarah, as well. So yeah, in terms of attacking play, the quality of the cross is remarkable apparently, and it resulted in 37 goals from the 171 goals in the last World Cup. Slightly more from the left, which was 20, than from the right. Am I doing all right, Stevie? The old stats.
Do you know what? I'm not even that big on stats. Like I'll take an insight from it, but so that you could read into, okay, crossing's difficult to score from, so teams let you put crosses in. Teams want to defend the middle, so they let you put crosses in. Naturally, if you have to defend 40 crosses in a game, you should probably score. If you have 40 crosses in a game, you probably should score. So there's these things where like data analytics come into the game, and coaches and players now have an understanding of it, and they go, right, we need to protect certain areas. You protect certain areas to an extent, but you leave somewhere else open. So I actually think in this World Cup, there will be a higher emphasis in transitions, but a much higher emphasis on 1v1s and being able to break the block. Like somebody like Neymar playing inside and dribbling and eliminating a couple of players. Eden Hazard doing it. So I think that the best teams, the teams with the biggest chance, will have one or two guys who have got the individual quality to eliminate a couple of players. They might not be successful all the time about it, but it might be that one moment of individual quality in the 75th minute at 0-0, which gets somebody through. And I think that the teams are really functional and have got the sum of their parts are more than what the players give them. The function of the team is better. Teams like Iceland, they maybe lack a little bit of individual flair. I think that this one, transitions are going to be big, set pieces are going to be big, but this one probably more than ever, you're going to need the one or two players with the little bit of flair and a bit of creativity in between the lines to eliminate someone and create scoring chances. So, like, I think Brazil will win it on the basis of that, having guys like Coutinho, Neymar, Willian, that can make that little bit of individual quality between the lines, whereas the teams who might struggle, they maybe don't have that so much and they'll be pressed 1v1 knowing that you can lose the ball.
I'm interested on that transition piece where is it a tournament? You're going to need to rest and recover in possession of the ball. So I'm interested to see how teams shape up in possession of the ball when they're trying to obviously rest, recover. And in typical World Cups, it's always been you circulate it expansively. You try and get your fullbacks wide and try and just move the opposition. But I think you're setting yourself up then for the counter if you do that. So I'm wondering if teams then might try and circulate it a bit with an overload centrally. And then how does an opposition then, do you then sacrifice a wide player or a wide attacker and just sacrifice a player in the defensive side on the opposition and just hang out wide and create those 1v1s rather than trying in the build up where it's going to be congested? That's the thing.
I think it'd be interesting to see what happens in different parts of the game, because I think this will be a very, very physical World Cup. I think we've seen now in the Premier League and stuff, like, I think the physical exertion of these players is becoming unreal because of various reasons tactically, but it'd be interesting to see how they set up and how they look to defend, and then how they then look to conserve their energy. Because if they start with a high press, because as we've said, like a lot of teams are going to play out from the back and look to build up play from the back. Well, if they go in a high press continuously, ultimately it's going to cost them. But at what point of the game does that change and do they go into, say, like a mid block or a low block? I'm looking forward to seeing how the game, as you're saying, Stevie, like the stats only tell a certain amount of the story, really. So it'll be interesting to see how games are managed, both physically and tactically as well.
Interested to see what we just talked about earlier with Gerard. How would you train the set pieces? Like, would you have? Is it better to have a list of 50, Stevie? If you were doing it, was it better to have a list of 50 set pieces, or would you nail 2 or 3, get them right? How would you train it?
There's 2 ways I would do it. One is if the opponent are zonal, and if the opponent are man marking. We have 2 or 3 routines for each. So are we trying to attack the front post, the back post, or the middle? Do we go short? So to try and understand what the opponent's organisation is, then go, right, these are the ones that we work on. If the team is mixed, for example, so maybe they defend zonally 6 yards and have 4 marking in the box, do we maybe put 5 against the 4 marking and try and create a free player to run in the gaps between the zonal? So to try and be really dominant in 2, 3 or 4 routines where maybe with Spain, for example, maybe Piqué is free on one of them, maybe Costa's free in a different one, maybe Busquets becomes free in a different, maybe they try and get a second ball off somewhere. So to try and emphasise the players that you've got against a qualitative superiority in one area where you go, okay, let's say it's me defending the back post and I'm 5'5", and you've got a 6'3" centre forward. Can you get somebody to run free, land on me, and then you score the header? So I think that depending on how the opponent sets up, it's natural that you're going to look for superiority. But I wouldn't have millions of routines. I think when you go into a World Cup, you need clarity. If you have 3 or 4 routines and you go, right, we know how to front post, back post, middle, edge of the box, whatever. That's what we're going to do. You sit in with the players, maybe we go, right, this is where they set up, this is how they organise, that's how we're going to score. We need the ball delivered here, this is how we're going to get somebody to arrive there. Maybe we score off the second ball. Because I think if you have 50 routines or 10 routines, maybe the players get their wires crossed and there's a miscommunication, which means you lose a chance to score. So I think it's more valuable to know exactly what you're going to do in 2 or 3 or 4 of them, rather than go, well, we've got millions of routines, like an NFL playbook. Maybe you have 500 routines, but you use 12 of them relentlessly, but you have one in the back of your mind for a different time. I don't think a World Cup's that sort of situation. I think you need clarity and making sure everybody knows what to do, depending on how the opposition organise themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say streamline the process, and roles and responsibilities are key. And then I think it ties into that whole game management from the manager and the coaches as well in terms of substitutions. Again, tie that into set pieces. I think organisations of teams is just becoming huge now. As we've said, it's becoming in and out of possession. And I think it's going to be a crucial part, and it'll be interesting to see the various kinds of set pieces that are going to come from some of the teams.
That's what I would love to see, that, Sarah, on that topic. Like, how many of them set piece, 11% goals, John's just put up how many percentage or what's the numbers that set pieces are scored in the last 5 or 10 minutes, either by fatigue or by making a sub that someone isn't clear of their role and switches off and you score.
Do you know what's interesting? Just to chuck one in there, it just popped into my brain now because we're talking about set pieces. As Stevie was talking about, a lot of it's going to depend on the organisation. I know in the last World Cup, a lot of the teams are sort of semi-zonal as opposed to full-on zonal. I reckon in this World Cup, putting it out there, I think there'll be a lot more players in the penalty area. So I reckon it'll almost be 11 players in the penalty area defending fully zonal. Could be wrong, but I reckon they'll go down that road. But to chuck a spanner in the works, there's the Premier League did a study. So there was a conference that I went to recently, and a guy called John Callahan was commissioned by the FA. He's a rugby specialist, and he looked at over 900 free kicks and over 900 corners at the world level. So your Neymars, your Bales, your Messis, etc. And of the 900 corners, over 60% were ineffective. They didn't find a single player or an area. Over 80% of the free kicks hit the wall. So I think from the 60% that he found, I think there was only like 2% that were actually correctly delivered into an area, as Steve was saying about qualitative, strength. So I think I'm chucking one out there is, do we do any practice on it? And if so, how much? Is it with the individuals? Do we ever take an individual to a side and work purely on his strength? Or do we always train the team, the day before the game? How often do we spend on it? Do we do enough in our academies? Because it seems to me every week, it comes down to one thing, and it's the technique. And I think the technique on delivery isn't good enough. Just chucking it out there.
We had I spoke to interviewed Dan Machici yesterday for the podcast, and when he went to MK Dons in the senior team, he brought in a ball striking coach because of that. He saw chances that they were getting 3 or 4 opportunities, and he said the delivery wasn't good enough, so he was doing it on an individual level. And he said the guy came in, done a presentation, would set up cameras, all out there. I would, if you've got the result, I think that's what it takes now. It's becoming like football, where a field kicker. That's what Beckham was for England, wasn't he, all those years ago?
You saw like Mid-Thailand did that as well the year they won the Danish Super League. They had, I think, Giovanni Vio came in and was the ball striking coach for set pieces, and they scored, I think it was 0.84 goals per game from set plays and managed to win the league from it. So Atletico Madrid, I don't know if they have a specialist coach for it, but they also are at the top end of La Liga largely because they're amazing at set plays. So if you're going to go down the route of saying, right, well, we attack wide, throw-ins and corners are going to be something that happen regularly. If you're going to attack wide, you need good crossing, good deliveries, good set plays. So if there are teams in the World Cup who are going to attack through fullbacks and wingers and play really wide, they probably have a long throw specialist. They probably have somebody who's exceptional at deliveries, and therefore they've probably worked a lot on making sure that they can take advantage of those. Teams that play in the middle more often, they have less corners, naturally, because the ball was in the middle. So even if you take my team for an example, our last game we had 584 passes. We had about 3 corners. So depending on what your normal attacking structure is going to be, will lead itself to, do you have additional opportunities from set plays like throw-ins or corners, and do you have somebody who can take advantage of it? So I think if Dan Machichi is going at MK Dons in the short time he was there, we want to take advantage of set plays. We need a coach for that. I think that's a really clever way of trying to maximise the amount of opportunities you're going to have, and maybe Thailand have helped spur that on at club level, and maybe it's something that we might see at national team level at World Cups in the future, because if Scotland ever do qualify, maybe we're going to have to attack more from set pieces. Maybe we need a coach for that. So it's something which, you know, we all know about, but how much attention is really paid to it?
And Sarah,
I think
technology is going to be
important
as well.
Oh.
Sorry,
Sarah. So for the FAW, I know you do courses with them. Is there any emphasis placed on set pieces, and is there much work with coaches to kind of train it?
I think in terms of my experience, I'm currently an A license candidate, and set pieces is something that's covered on the A license. It's something that they dedicate a module to, because obviously working at an A license standard within a, you know, you're expected to be in the senior game. There's much more emphasis on it at that level. I think in terms of the lower levels of coach education, I don't see a need for it within standardized education. I think it's good to touch on it, but I think the emphasis, I think it's important. My opinion is you know, you just spoke about technique. The guys just spoke about technique, and I think it's understanding. It's making sure the coach can understand how to break down a technique, how to identify when they need support with performing that technique. You know, I think, and it's a lot about repetition, and I think time is of the essence a lot of the time. Within, you know, with lower leagues and stuff, they haven't got the time to really dedicate so much from a coaching aspect, and coaches away, you know, planning their sessions. They haven't got that much time to dedicate to set pieces, although it is a huge part of the game now. But as I was saying, with younger players and stuff, that skill acquisition element is huge. And I think at this level, you know, in terms of the World Cup, I think a lot of the onus is on the players now, in terms of making sure they're getting that repetition themselves after they might be doing a practical session or some kind of preparation for a match. I think the onus now is on the players at that level to, you know, you hear stories about, you know, like Beckham, you mentioned Beckham, about staying after training and repeating the technique of performing that free kick. So I think a lot of it it's on the players now. I think at that level, at the top end, it needs to be on the players, not just the coaches.
Gerard, you were going to say something.
I was going to, is it this tournament that the use of technology, the laws changed? So where the live data can be streamed actually in the dugout, as opposed to only at halftime or at the end?
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think they're the statistics, something.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I'd be curious, how do you think that's going to change anything? What's that going to allow the coaches to be able to make decisions on?
Yeah, Gary, for you, when you're on the sideline, how would that impact you, having live statistics on the game?
I mean, I would like to see the type of tendencies, how the team attacks, how the team defends, or how the team builds up, and how the team is trying to prevent, where they're trying to stop you. that would be useful for a halftime discussion. But at this level, when you're looking at, I read the report on the 2014, in the high pressing teams that kind of veered off after 15, 20 minutes. So now I think defensively teams are going to defend and somewhat. I think in a tournament you have to be effective in defending, high press, medium, and a low block. So is it, if you come in at half time with a report from a staff, could it all be ripped up 5 minutes into the second half? So I'm not sure whether that would. I think in theory it's great. We can give players more information. We can show them stuff. We can dazzle them at half time. But I would question at this level whether other teams aren't changing stuff just at the same speed that you're trying to stop them.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to put one team at an advantage. Just to touch on that, it's not going to put one team at any more advantage than the other team, really, if everyone's able to do it. I think it comes down to, coaches or whoever's it. If it's an analyst, how effective they are at identifying a problem quickly, and if they can then relay it concisely. Because if it was me, I'd want it concise. I just want 1 point, and if it's something quick, then we'll fix it there and then. I think it will be good. I think because it'll be from a better angle to see things. I think it'll be effective, but I don't think it'll put any one team in advantage.
Okay, great. So as a summary then, what are we expecting to see in this 2018 World Cup?
Very well organised.
Loads of goals.
I agree. I think there'll be tons. I think there'll be a lot of goals. I hope there is anyway. I think those teams will be very well organised as well. Very well.
Goalkeeper mistakes as well. I think the goalkeepers are going to have a shocker. Just because there's so much. I think it's so difficult. There's so much now, the build up, and they're having to make decisions. And I think with teams now defensively being so good, there's going to be so much pressure on the goalkeeper to solve problems. I just see them having howlers for this World Cup. So I'm hoping that there, because it'll lead a bit more excitement.
I think more of an emphasis on one-on-ones, like breaking down blocks, one-on-one play, and try to get your best individual dribbler one-on-one against maybe a weak player in midfield or a weak player in the back line, and trying to expose the lines that way. I think if everybody sits in a low block and just sits in defence for their lives, that's great. But you can take out one guy or two guys and puncture a hole in the defence and score from it. So I think the teams who have got that little bit of individual quality will be the ones that go far.
Gerard, any predictions? Yeah.
I agree on that. I think that's probably going to be bang on from Stevie. You look at previous tournaments with a Robben, a Muller, a Rodriguez, Sanchez, these type of players, that individual extra, that's going to be the key. I think from the actual technical report that you shared, I think it was more than 50% of the goals came from sort of solos. A lot of it came from your forward players. So I absolutely agree with that. I think that's going to be the key.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So we have actually run out of time now. 30 minutes have gone pretty quickly. So that brings the webinar to the end. So before we go, we'll just go around the panelists and they can tell you where they can be found on social media and any projects that they're currently involved in. So Sarah.
My Twitter handle is @Sarah Hilton, SARAHILTON. So currently a lecturer at Glyndwr University on a football specific degree. So if anyone's interested in coming to study on that, come and get in touch with me. And any support really around skill acquisition and structuring technical programs, free to give me a call.
Okay, great. Stevie.
You can find me on Twitter @StevieGrieve, and please sign up for my Tactical Teacher e-course so that you learn more about tactics, largely because I'd like to get PR in Canada because now we've got the World Cup. Party time.
Gary.
Yeah, I'm a Gary Curneen on Twitter. I promote so much stuff. You'll know very quickly if you follow me what I sell and stuff. Yeah.
And Gerard.
Twitter @Gerard_Jones. Feel free to follow me. Get in touch. Always happy to help. Always willing to learn.
Okay, thank you very much, then Sarah, Gary, Stevie, and Gerard. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, John.